Amazing turn of events. CEO yells at woman by his Bugatti. You won't believe what she discovers. Sarah stepped outside her humid, cluttered lab into the unforgiving city streets. The lunch break she had needed felt like just another suffocating moment in her increasingly erratic life. Her young son, Max, needed her energy, her presence. Yet, her meager paycheck from the research lab seemed increasingly insufficient to provide him with the life he deserved. Possible breakthroughs, muddled by the overwhelming weight of invisibility, crushed her spirit. A reality where her intelligence and grit were dismissed by male colleagues. As she traversed the sea of skyscrapers and blaring car horns, she craved that rare moment of peace. The kind she often fantasized about instead of this cacophony of chaos. But then, her heart raced as shadows collided with the blinding sunlight. There he stood, John, the commanding CEO, dripping with arrogance beside his gleaming Bugatti. She had heard the whispers, how his ruthless efficiency left a wake of unnoticed talent, including hers. His booming voice cut through the air, harsh as a whip. "Do you even belong here?" he barked at a less fortunate passerby, escalating the absurdity of the moment. A small piece of her cracked under the weight of his disdain, and unexpectedly his words turned venomous, crashing into her like a tidal wave. Those words could easily have been directed at her. Suddenly red-hot fury ignited within her. It shattered the cocoon of despair she had wrapped herself in. The fight against obscurity took a sharp turn. As his voice faded into the background, Sarah felt a desperate urge to prove her worth bloomed. Her research, her groundbreaking environmental solution, gained urgency as John's words settled in her mind like embers. But who would notice? The constant stream of patronizing comments from her colleagues clouded her enthusiasm. She was scared, overwhelmed, afraid of being seen only as Max's mother rather than the scientist she aspired to be. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The impending deadline of the prestigious academic conference loomed, tainting her optimism with nagging self-doubt. The voice in her head grew louder. What if no one listened? What if John was right? Every rejection letter had pierced her confidence deeper than the last. Even the fear of financial instability threatened to dismantle her fledgling project. Her whispers of hope became buried under layers of sleepless nights and anxiety-ridden thoughts, where visions of failure thrived rather than dreams of success. Then came the day of her presentation, and with it an unbearable surge of anxiety that clawed at her chest. As she stood before an intimidating audience filled with esteemed scientists, she spotted John in a corner, casually reviewing documents with an air of smugness. Would he dismiss her again? Would they all? The moment she began to speak, she couldn't shake the image of him, every sneer and scornful glance a constant, unwelcome echo in her mind. Her heart raced not from excitement, but from the fear of tantalizing and heavy truths waiting to be unearthed, binding her fate with John's in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The tension hung in the air, an electric, unyielding grip, leaving Sarah at the utterly precarious edge of revelation's abyss, questioning everything she had fought so fiercely to achieve. As Sarah's voice wavered at the forefront of the presentation, she could feel every eye in the room focused on her. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart, matching the rhythm of her creeping doubts. She had spent countless hours preparing her research, painstakingly crafting every detail, yet facing this esteemed panel intimidated her more than she had imagined. She glanced momentarily toward John, who remained a picture of disinterest. His demeanor seemed to suggest that he had already dismissed her before she even opened her mouth. The unfairness of it all surged through her as she wiped clammy hands on her slacks, reminding herself that her research was important, valid even. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the fear aside and focused on the slides she had prepared. They were filled with figures that outlined her revolutionary environmental solution. a concept painstakingly developed to combat years of neglect and oversight. Yet, as she continued, self-doubt crept back in, like shadows flickering under the fluorescent lights. Every time she glanced at John, she envisioned the disappointment in his eyes if she faltered. Why did his opinion hold such weight? She felt the pressure to impress, not just to prove him wrong, but to validate her worth as a scientist beyond the confines of motherhood. Her words flowed haltingly, shrouded in insecurity, each statistical point seeming to lack the punch it deserved. But then, something shifted. In that moment of vulnerability, she noticed the engaged looks from other audience members, a flicker of curiosity igniting in their eyes. It dawned on her that they had come not to criticize, but to understand. Encouraged, she leaned into her passion, breathing life into her presentation, speaking about the implications of her findings with renewed vigor. For the first time, she blocked out John's presence and focused solely on the value of her work. As the presentation concluded, the room erupted with applause. For a brief moment, Sarah basked in the warmth of acknowledgement. But as she stepped from the podium, exhilaration intertwined with fear. Would they truly be interested, or was this just a fleeting moment of validation? She raced to her seat, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle back on her shoulders. Almost immediately the questions began to fly. They were challenging yet constructive. A welcome dynamism in the dialogue. Each inquiry pushed her to think deeper and articulate more clearly. Sarah felt herself awakening, reveling in the exchange of ideas. It was exhilarating. The mask of inadequacy she wore began to crumble, replaced by a growing certitude. She could hold her ground, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could demand their respect. Eventually, in the distance, she spotted John moving closer. His expression had shifted, the smugness had evaporated, replaced by an unexpected intensity. As he approached, an unfamiliar surge of excitement tingled in Sarah's stomach. This moment could either shatter her newfound confidence or elevate it to uncharted heights. She chose to stand tall. "Impressive work," he said, his tone unexpectedly devoid of condescension. "But do you really think it will change anything?" His question hung heavy in the air, a challenge wrapped in skepticism. She could feel herself teetering at the edge of confrontation. Her initial impulse was to retreat, but she felt something inside her harden instead. This was her chance, not just to prove him wrong, but to assert her place in a world that had so often ignored her. "The change we need won't come easy, but it starts here," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze unwaveringly. "Mediocre solutions will only perpetuate the status quo. The time for complacency has ended." As she spoke those words, a thrill coursed through her, transforming fear into purpose. This moment marked a turning point, not only in her professional life, but also in how she viewed herself. Yet, that challenge remained as potent as ever. She knew that grasping onto this newfound strength would require more than just this afternoon's success. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, and John would not be the last critic she encountered. As she walked away from him, another notion struck her. What if she could leverage this event to her advantage, to propel her research into tangible action? Perhaps a partnership with the right people could give her the power she needed to shift the narrative from being dismissed to being indispensable. The possibilities sparked a thrilling notion that she had yet to fully grasp. But first, she needed to confront the lingering doubts within herself. Would she continue fighting for her vision, or would the very reality she sought to change become another oppressive ceiling? With renewed determination, Sarah knew one thing was certain. The time had come to face the shadows of her past, and she wouldn't shy away any longer. Looking around, one question crept into her mind. How far could she really push her newfound courage before it began to falter against realism? As Sarah stepped outside, the late afternoon sun enveloped her in a warm embrace, its light contrasting sharply with the anxieties that had plagued her moments earlier. The intense moments of the presentation began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound clarity. Her breath came easier now, the crisp air refreshing as she contemplated the nuances of the conversation with John. Engaging with someone like him, who had once loomed large in her mind, had ignited a flicker of ambition she couldn't ignore. and now she faced the tantalizing idea of what this could mean moving forward. She remembered the questions posed by her audience, each one a thread unraveling the veil of insecurity that had hung over her for so long. They had not only engaged with her findings but had illuminated the very validity of her work, sparking an awakening within her. Sarah felt a gentle pull. Wasn't it time to find a way to transform her burgeoning confidence into action? To reconfigure her research into something impactful? It was like standing at the base of a mountain that awaited exploration. Yet as she strolled down the street, her initial exuberance began to slip, the gravity of uncertainty lurking in the back of her mind. How would she navigate the inevitable roadblocks? She had yet to build the necessary networks, and confidence without support often crumbled quickly in the competitive landscape of academia. As she neared her car, her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her thoughts aside. It was a message from her colleague Maya, who had been supportive throughout the ups and downs of Sarah's journey. "We need to discuss your ideas. Can we meet Friday?" There it was, an opportunity, yet another avenue to bolster her resolve. Maya had connections that could amplify Sarah's advocacy, and perhaps they could embark on something resounding together. The prospect energized her, but shadows of self-doubt materialized again. What if she fell short of expectations? What if her ideas were brushed aside once again? With each step, she wrestled with this internal dialogue, grappling for the right answers. The unsettling truth was that nobody else could quell her spiraling fears. That was an inside job, one that demanded a warrior spirit she was only beginning to recognize. Arriving at her car, she fumbled with the keys, half listening to the sounds of the city. Horns honking, conversations echoing, life buzzing unabated. In that din, her phone buzzed again, a notification from the research journal she had submitted her work to weeks prior. Clenching her jaw, she hesitated before opening the message. The weight of anticipation surged anew. Acceptance or rejection could change everything. Taking a breath, she tapped on the screen and felt her heart stutter as the words loaded. "We are pleased to inform you." Relief washed over her like a tidal wave, and a grin spread across her face despite the possible obstacles ahead. She had crossed a threshold, and yet a nagging thought warned her not to overlook the next rung on this ladder she wanted to climb. With her heart still racing, she recalled the idea of collaboration with Maya. Being published was a start, but reaching out to influencers, pitching her ideas, and garnering financial backing would be her crucible. She needed to champion her findings even more assertively now. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Determined, she made her way home with new resolve, her mind racing with strategies. There was a path forward. She could either let her apprehensions restrict her progress or use this momentum to bound forward. As she pulled into her driveway, her phone pinged again. This time, it was a news alert about a regional summit addressing environmental issues, an event where prominent figures would converge, eager for innovative solutions. Her pulse quickened. Was it possible she could participate? Could she gain traction by introducing herself to those who could appreciate the merit of her ideas? The air buzzed with suggestion. What if she could present her research at that summit, turned into a compelling narrative with the power to ignite broader discussions? One glimpse of John's dismissive yet intrigued expression flashed in her mind, a reminder that she had already begun breaking through barriers. Sarah knew this was a key moment, a decision that could open doors or chain her back to complacency. As she closed the car door, the reality of the tasks ahead settled heavily upon her. There were no guarantees, only the raw work ethic she had always possessed, and an insatiable will to move outward. The tension between fear and ambition twisted within her. Would she act before the possibilities slipped away? The choice lay invitingly before her. She could choose to rise, carve her space in this world, and overcome the weight of every doubt that had ever threatened to shape her existence. As she turned her focus to the summit, she couldn't shake the lingering question. Was she ready to step onto that stage, and was she prepared for whatever came in the wake of her boldness? The following morning, Sarah awoke with determination etched across her features. The sun rose steadily, bleeding golden hues into her bedroom as she sat up and reminded herself that today mattered. The summit loomed ahead with the potential for a breakthrough that she couldn't afford to miss. She dressed methodically, selecting her clothes not just for comfort but for the confidence they evoked. A fitted blazer, a crisp blouse, and well-tailored trousers made her feel as if she could command the room. She needed every inch of self-assurance as she imagined presenting her research, a blend of environmental science and innovative strategy, to an influential audience. Over coffee, she read up on the summit's speakers, scouring their backgrounds for possible conversation starters, insights, or even critiques she could utilize. The clock ticked relentlessly as she considered what it would mean to make connections with these established professionals. The mere idea sent butterflies fluttering in her stomach, making her acutely aware of the pressure that came with such high stakes. With Maya's message fresh in her mind, Sarah quickly reached out to propose meeting later that day. Her heart raced at the thought of their collaborative potential. Would they strategize on how to present her findings? Could she lean on Maya's connections to introduce herself to the summit speakers? After sending off the message, she shifted focus, organizing her thoughts for the summit into a clear, concise narrative that could capture attention. She moved through her living room, pacing as she rehearsed her pitch, tightening her content until every word felt impactful. Despite her preparation, a certainty of doubt began to simmer. What if she faltered under the spotlight? Rejections echoed in the back of her mind. Her voice wavered as she practiced, the insecurity creeping back in like an uninvited guest. But she pushed through. Each iteration of her pitch was a hammer blow against those doubts, reshaping them into resolve. Once ready, she stepped outside to the fresh afternoon once more, her intent clarity temporarily threatened by the familiar tension building within. At the car, she paused to take a deep breath, seeking the emotion that had fueled her ambition so far. There was no turning back. She had come too far. After a short drive, she reached the venue, a stately building adorned with banners of the summit's different themes. The air hummed with conversations, laughter punctuating professional discussions, nearly overwhelming her senses. Stepping through the entrance, she noticed attendees moving in clusters, animatedly exchanging ideas, and she felt a twinge of belonging begin to take root. Sarah sought out the speaker list and found a familiar name, Dr. Peter Hale, renowned for his groundbreaking work in climate action. She wrestled with the thought of approaching him. Was she prepared for such a direct interaction? Her heart raced as she visualized their exchange. Choosing the path of boldness, she gazed around, determined to navigate this bustling sea of minds. Each moment there became an exploration of connection, a hunt for opportunity. She mingled, introduced herself to strangers, and exchanged business cards, but her mind lingered on how to stand out from the crowd. As she scanned the crowd, she caught sight of a luxurious Bugatti parked at the facility's entrance, outside the throng of attendees. It exuded an aura of power and wealth, the powerful world she had always felt distanced from. But then it registered. Who drove such a car? Surely someone influential was inside. Her pulse kicked up a notch. Suddenly she spotted John moving through the crowd, a sleek phone pressed to his ear. He looked every bit the part of the successful academic she had hoped to impress. But there was tension in his posture, a momentary departure from the affable demeanor he had displayed during her presentation. Sarcasm flitted on his lips as he brushed by, not sparing Sarah a second glance. The encounter felt like a gut punch. Was this the man she had once admired? There was something uncouth in his air that sent a spark of defiance through her. Then, without warning, a voice rang out, sharp and authoritative. "You can't just brush people off, John." It was a woman stepping out of the passenger seat of the lavish car, her expression stormy. She confronted him directly, a stark contrast to the elegance of her attire. The scene unfolded like a swift drama, the conflict between two powerful figures playing out in front of a crowd that had drawn to the spectacle. As curiosity gripped the attendees, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. Within that moment of confrontation, something shifted inside her. This was her stage. Others dissected John's demeanor, the hidden layers of elite behavior unraveling, and suddenly she felt an urge to leap into the fray, to assert her presence among the dynamics at play. The clashing energies had summoned a fierce understanding that perhaps her own work wasn't about meekness. There was strength and assertiveness waiting to be unveiled. Would she confront John? Could she capitalize on this unexpected surge of emotion and pursue the kind of conversations that had thus far eluded her? The choices loomed ahead, tinged with uncertainty, yet crackling with potential. The moment was ripe for action. What would Sarah choose, now that the tension in her surroundings mirrored the conflict within herself? In the tangle of voices and excitement, Sarah felt a surge of empowerment pushing her forward, drowning out her self-doubt. Could this be her moment? With John acting so brazenly indifferent, her frustration morphed into audacity. She had spent too long living in the shadows of others' accomplishments, and today, the gravity of the situation beckoned her to step forward. With purpose, she maneuvered through the clusters of attendees, her pulse pounding ever so loudly. Each step was a declaration. Approaching John and the woman confronting him felt like drawing a line in the sand, asserting herself in the face of someone she once viewed as a mentor. What was left of the admiration she had once harbored was now overshadowed by a mingling of contempt and determination. As she reached the immediate vicinity, she could hear John's dismissive tone, the way he undermined the woman's authority with a casual flick of his wrist. Sarah's instincts kicked in, recognizing the shifting dynamics. This wasn't solely a spat over egos. It was about respect. "Excuse me," Sarah interjected, her voice steady but filled with resolve. The crowd shifted slightly, faces turning towards her. Curiosity piqued. Both John and the woman paused, the tension palpable. For a heartbeat, all eyes were on her. John's facade of confidence cracked with surprise, his dismissive glances vanishing, replaced with a flicker of interest. "You really shouldn't treat people that way," she continued, feeling an empowering rush as the words tumbled out. The focus of attention shifted entirely onto her, and with it, the energy in the air charged. Respect is part of every conversation, especially in this field. The woman beside John raised her eyebrows, visibly impressed. It dawned on Sarah that for so long she had been defining herself through the lens of people's reactions to her. Here, in this moment, she was not just a participant, she was a contender. "Who are you?" John asked, the casual arrogance dripping from his voice as he regained some composure. But there was an edge to his inquiry, a new curiosity. "I'm Sarah," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I've worked hard to be here, but I can't pretend that treating others like lesser beings is acceptable, especially from someone who has achieved success. It's just a flaw waiting to erode credibility." The words hung in the air, and for a fraction of a moment, silence enveloped them. Sarah felt the surge within her, the embers of her growth stoking the flames into life. Gaze locked with John's, she realized she was no longer afraid. Challenge became the thrill she had sought and the validation she had yearned for. The woman beside John tilted her head, intrigued. It was a small yet significant gesture, a nod of acknowledgement that venomous encounters can morph into opportunities for growth. John's demeanor evaporated slightly under the scrutiny, and he shifted uncomfortably, sparking Sarah's resolve. "You can't just walk through life dismissing those around you. It weakens the field," she added, her heart racing with the thrill of standing her ground. "Maybe it's time you reevaluate whose expertise you're willing to dismiss," Sarah finished, the weight of her own words settling in her chest. The moment resonated. Other attendees began murmuring, some exchanging glances and nodding in agreement. Sarah felt her place in that crowded space solidifying as she caught snippets of support. Whether she faced rejection or validation, what mattered was that vulnerability she had once feared was now her strength. Over the thrum of voices, she sensed a shift, a collective recognition of her assertion echoing through the crowd. Then John opened his mouth, ready to retaliate. As she braced for a rebuttal, preparing for the possibility of a stinging comeback, Sarah was struck by a new thought. What if this confrontation led somewhere unexpected? Could she expect more from this encounter? There lay an unexplored potential, a possibility to not just confront, but to connect and grow. Every ounce of doubt that had plagued her until this moment dimmed against this newfound clarity, and Sarah realized the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. What would happen next? How far could she ride this wave of defiance, and could she leverage it into the valuable connections she had sought all along? The tension coiled tighter, awaiting resolution, even as she sensed another challenge nipping at her heels. Would she proceed and face whatever fallout came, or would she waver now that she had raised her voice? The reality of the moment set in, palpable and charged, and in that clarity emerged a daunting question. Was she ready to expose her vulnerabilities against an unpredictable force? Before Sarah could process John's anticipated response, an auxiliary voice broke through the charged atmosphere. "What exactly are you implying, Sarah?" His tone dripped with condescension, yet it was edged with an unexpected caution. It was as if he sensed that her boldness might lead to something more significant than mere conflict. The woman who had stood next to John, who had once been silent, suddenly stepped forward. "I think what Sarah means," she began, locking her gaze with Sarah's, "is that professional success doesn't give anyone the right to belittle others. It's about cultivating respect, and you clearly have much to learn." A ripple of whispered agreement spread through the crowd. Sarah felt the unexpected alliance ignite a flame of encouragement within her. This woman, whoever she was, had just turned the tide while standing shoulder to shoulder with Sarah. John grimaced, the flicker of unease evident. "And where do you think this so-called respect comes from? It certainly doesn't come from berating someone in public or what? Seeking validation from others?" His sneer was intended to slice back, but Sarah took a step closer to the interloper, now confident to not just explore her own opinions but to expand upon them. "Respect is reciprocal, John. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about collaboration. It's about recognizing the worth that every person brings to the table." She felt the strength of her conviction driving her forward. This time, she wouldn't let him derail her. This was her moment, and she needed to own every syllable. As for validation, it's not just about getting compliance from those around you. It's ensuring they feel valued, recognized, and encouraged. That's where true leadership lies, she asserted, her heart racing, but her resolve solidifying. The look on John's face faltered as disbelief wrestled with annoyance. Did he expect her to crumble? Sarah questioned. She had spent too long assuming she had to yield to his careless authority. As the murmurs grew louder, another voice chimed in. "Exactly. We shouldn't confuse authority with respect. It's a different game," a man shouted from the back of the crowd, further fueling the energy. John's lips tightened as he surveyed the shifting tide unfurling before him. "This is a waste of time. If you've lost your chance at being taken seriously, that's your problem." And just like that, he retreated, turning away to slip through the crowd, leaving behind a smattering of hushed discussion and palpable tension. Sarah stood there, facing the gathering group, her pulse quickening with the ebb and flow of newfound possibilities. The moment of conflict transformed into a moment of connection. She had exposed herself to vulnerability, only to discover that it was her unyielding strength that drove her forward. The woman from earlier approached her with an encouraging smile. "I'm Clara," she said, extending her hand. "What you did back there, that was bold, and it took guts. You could inspire so many more people if you continued down this road." "Thank you," Sarah replied, shaking Claudia's hand firmly. An unfamiliar warmth spread through her, refreshing and empowering. This exchange felt unexpectedly motivating. Clara leaned in slightly, her voice lowered. "John may have dismissed you now, but remember that every seed of doubt you sow becomes a burden to him. Watch your own development carefully. Those like him tend to underestimate the impact of words and actions." Clara's insight ignited a flicker of determination within Sarah, a realization that she had the power to redefine the narrative surrounding her. But the question loomed. How do you truly nurture that potential? The afternoon seemed to stretch before her, rich with opportunities yet undefined. As uncertainty nestled in, she felt an inevitable pull, to not just harness her voice, but to refine her understanding of the spaces around her and learn how to navigate the complex web of ambition and respect. What if this was only the beginning? John may have thought he could dismiss her, but was her voice about to become the beacon of a broader dialogue about integrity in their industry? How could she forge her path with intention, transforming every confrontation into a learning experience? As curiosity rooted itself in her mind, Sarah knew something pivotal was on the horizon. With Clara's words echoing in her mind, Sarah found herself moving through the rest of the day with a renewed sense of purpose. Each task at work seemed tinged with the potential for greater engagements. As she stood in front of her computer, the usual stalemate of her workday transformed into an arena of possibilities. No longer would she let John's voice dominate her thoughts. She would carve out her own space, her own narrative. The next morning she found herself at the coffee shop around the corner, a common spot for her colleagues. The hum of conversation filled the air alongside the robust aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Sarah felt strange yet exhilarating as she observed the dynamics around her, the laughter, the camaraderie, the ways people interacted with one another. These interactions, she realized, were vital ingredients of respect, of the very attributes that she had begun to champion. In that moment, she decided it was important to not only articulate her views, but to embody them. She approached the barista, a bright-eyed young woman, and engaged her in conversation, asking how her day was and genuinely listening to her response. It was a small step, but Sarah felt the shift in her demeanor. Empathy and validation started to ripple outward, and the serendipitous connection fueled her resolve. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah meticulously documented her insights in a personal journal, honing her thoughts into a cohesive narrative about leadership, for herself and for her peers. She read books on emotional intelligence, leadership styles, and conflict resolution, learning from each volume how to navigate the minefield of workplace hierarchy with grace and authority. Writing allowed her to articulate her burgeoning philosophy on respect and collaboration, inviting a deeper understanding of herself and her aspirations. But there remained a gnawing concern. What if John returned to assert his dominance and dismiss her efforts? Was it enough to simply redefine her voice when the loudest voice in the room could snap back? During a lunch meeting with her team, Sarah found herself wrestling with the challenge of addressing past conflict while steering the conversation towards a collective vision of their future. Her heart raced as they discussed recent projects, and the possibility of presenting new ideas loomed ahead. She hesitated, questioning whether her contributions would be welcome or met with derision. Channeling Clara's encouragement, Sarah raised her hand. "I have some suggestions that focus not just on completion but on collaborative efforts that respect everyone's ideas," she announced. Silence enveloped the table. Would they embrace this change, or would doubt cloud their support? As she spoke, Sarah felt the initial inklings of anxiety wash away, replaced by a surging confidence. Ideas flowed freely, and her colleagues leaned in, intrigued and engaged. The conversation evolved from merely transactional to transformational, and she reveled in their shared energy, learning that connection was not just about speaking but about inviting and nurturing each voice. Finally, she realized, forging her path wasn't purely a battle against John. It was about the opportunity to uplift others alongside her. The anxieties that had previously wrapped around her heart now loosened slightly, giving way to the promise of a bright future. Yet as they wrapped up the meeting, a text notification buzzed through her pocket, jolting her back to reality. It was a new message from Clara, filled with cryptic enthusiasm. "Have you heard about the upcoming board meeting? Rumors are flying about John's latest proposal, and I suspect he's not prepared for what's coming." Sarah's pulse quickened as she considered the implications. What could this mean for her journey? Would the chance to confront the very man who had belittled her finally surface? The suspense brewed within her, hinting at another turning point waiting just ahead. The board meeting loomed over Sarah like a storm cloud, promising both uncertainty and an exhilarating chance to step further into the leadership she had begun to envision. As days slipped by, the anticipation gnawed at her, intertwining with her strategic preparations. Would this be the moment she could more decisively articulate her ideas and challenge John's reputation? Or would she retreat under the pressure of his formidable presence? In the quiet hours leading up to the meeting, Sarah crafted a concise presentation that highlighted not only her team's achievements, but also the areas where collaboration had flourished. She practiced articulating her thoughts, standing in front of her bedroom mirror, rehearsing each inflection and gesture. With every run-through, that initial flicker of fear morphed into a clearer image of strength. She was no longer simply a participant in her own story. She was the narrator. Arriving at the office early on the fateful day, Sarah took a moment to survey her surroundings. The thrill of possibility coursed through her veins. But as she entered the conference room, her confidence wavered. The air was charged with tension, and John's presence grew palpable, like a charged wire waiting for a spark. Studying his body language as he examined the agenda, she sensed a familiar dismissiveness lurking in the shadows of his authoritative demeanor. The meeting commenced with John effortlessly taking control, outlining his proposal, while colleagues exchanged skeptical glances and whispered critiques. Each word he spoke felt like a reminder of her subservience, boxing her into a familiar role. And then, like thunder in a clear sky, Sarah remembered her goal. This wasn't just about her own ascent. It was about dismantling the wall that John had built around his authority. As the conversation drifted toward resistance against John's plans, the moment arrived. Sarah felt the air around her shift. Colleagues were restless, an undercurrent of frustration bubbling beneath their polished facades. Seizing the opportunity, she raised her hand, heart pounding like a drum. "If I may," she interjected carefully, seeking to insert her voice over John's. All eyes turned. "I believe we can refine and adjust these proposals to better incorporate our diverse strengths. Rather than a top-down structure, a collaborative approach could enhance buy-in and establish a stronger team dynamic." Her voice steadied, but the weight of their attention felt heavier than ever. John's glare flickered. "And what evidence do you have that collaboration can yield better results than a decisive strategy?" His dismissiveness hung in the air like a chilling challenge. The room went silent, all eyes now darting between Sarah and John, tension crackling like static. Sarah's pulse quickened, but this time she did not falter. "We've seen it work, haven't we? Look at Project X. The collaboration led our success, didn't it?" A spark of realization ignited among her colleagues, and murmurs of agreement began to stir. Sarah continued, riding the wave of affirmation. "When we feel heard, we're motivated to contribute more. This isn't just about making a decision. It's about fostering an environment of mutual respect where everyone can succeed." Each word bolstered her growing commitment to this vision of leadership. As the meeting drew to a close, confusion and curiosity clouded John's face. For the first time he seemed unsure, grappling with her defiance while colleagues began to engage him more assertively. But just as Sarah felt a surge of triumph, a new voice interrupted the atmosphere. Clara's voice, vibrating with urgency through her phone. "Sarah, you need to check your email. It's crucial. Something big just happened." Her heart raced again, a whirlwind of thoughts swirling. What had transpired that could shift the dynamics between her and John further? Was this the game changer she had been waiting for? And what might it reveal about the path she had chosen? A path woven with ambition, confrontation, and the potential to redefine her narrative once and for all? Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone, her heart an unconventional drumbeat against the backdrop of the fading conference room discussions. Clara's urgency pierced through the fading adrenaline rush of the meeting, and as she unlocked her device, anticipation mixed with dread. The email appeared at the top of her inbox, its subject line stark in contrast to the mundane titles of previous days. Urgent, company restructuring updates. She clicked it open, and within moments her world tilted. The message outlined a sweeping corporate shakeup, significant layoffs, and most alarmingly, a direct reference to John's pending departure. A knot formed in her stomach while exhilaration clawed at her insides. This was the shift she had unconsciously hoped for, but now that it was within grasp, an unfamiliar apprehension mingled with her excitement. For the first time she saw potential not just for herself, but for her team, who had long operated under John's shadow. Would this upheaval be a chance for her to step into a role that wasn't just about challenging authority, but reshaping the entire work culture they endured? The stakes felt seismic. A whispered conversation from her colleagues pulled her back to the room, their voices punctuating the newfound silence that blanketed the aftermath of John's presentation. She could sense the energy changing. Intrigue filled the space like a tangible entity. Sarah straightened her back, school of thought clashing violently with her desire to retreat into safe obscurity. The phone still felt warm in her palm, a reminder of how swiftly life could turn. It was time to act. "Let's address what we can do next, shall we?" she called out, surprising herself with the vigor in her voice. All eyes shifted back to her, wide awake with curiosity. Clearly we are at a crossroads. If John is genuinely stepping back, whether by choice or by necessity, we must seize this opportunity to have a dialogue about our future. Each syllable felt calculated, yet she found her footing within the rhythm of the room. Colleagues nodded, a chorus of silent agreement blossoming around her. "I'm willing to lead that dialogue," she stated, braving the edge of vulnerability. "We can craft a collective vision, no more top-down directives. The energy generated when everyone is heard and valued will exceed what we can achieve in isolation." Sarah's raised voice met resistance, but this time the resolve fueling her words outweighed the doubts. Some colleagues whispered supportive comments, sharing their own frustrations born of years under John's leadership. She felt an electrical current of shared sentiments, binding her to her peers. The web of collaboration she had sought to ignite was beginning to weave itself. As the meeting shifted into lively discussions spilling from the silence, the dawning realization that she could lead this new movement began creeping in. But deep down, a disquieting thought clawed at her. The prospect of a new leader inevitably meant a new set of challenges, a potential adversary who might not take kindly to power slipping from their grasp. Would a new CEO be as unyielding or dismissive as John? Would Sarah's assertiveness in this transitional phase seal her fate as a target in this new realm? Her heart pounded with both the weight of her aspirations and the uncertainty of forthcoming battles. The room buzzed with newfound possibilities, her colleagues caught in a whirlwind of enthusiasm, but the shadow of upcoming conflicts loomed large. With the threshold of opportunity standing just before her, Sarah's internal narrative pulsated with a mix of ambition and trepidation. Was she truly prepared to navigate this change, with all its unpredictability and friction? A question resonated in her mind. Could she harness this moment to not only reshape her career, but also break the cycle of leadership subjugation she had endured? Just as she began to formulate a strategic approach, her phone buzzed again, this time more insistent. Clara's name lit up the screen once more. "Sarah, wait until you see this video from the board meeting." Another twist in this narrative awaited her, and she felt the thrill of uncertainty and potential swelling within her. A new narrative was yet to be unveiled. What was in that video could very well tilt the momentum of her newly won standing. With a steadying breath, she braced herself for the revelations to come, recognizing that every next step in this game demanded not just her courage, but a fresh appreciation of the strategic landscape unfolding before her. Sarah stood in the conference room, the residual excitement from her bold confrontation still palpable in the air. She had grasped the moment and asserted her voice, earning the respect of her colleagues in a way she never thought possible. As the dynamic of the room pulsated with positive energy, she could feel the cloak of invisibility that had shrouded her for years slowly lifting away, revealing a new path before her. Clara's message regarding the company restructuring buzzed in her mind. The potential departure of John, the once formidable antagonistic presence that had suppressed her confidence and stifled her ideas, marked a seismic shift. Those buzzing questions she had muttered to herself for so long, transformed now into vibrant sparks of possibility. Would she be able to cultivate an environment founded on collaboration and mutual respect? Would her new role allow her to lead the transformation from the antiquated structures that had defined the workplace? As discussions swirled around her, Sarah felt an exhilarating sense of purpose crystallizing. She recognized that the power to shape that future lay in her hands. Gathering her breath, she redirected the conversation among her colleagues. "Let's come together, each of us bringing our ideas to the table about where we envision this new direction. We shouldn't just react, we should create." The room, once filled with uncertainty, erupted into a collective brainstorming session. Ideas sparking like fireworks lit off in a dark night. Solutions poured forth organically, and not as a series of isolated statements, but instead as enriching dialogues rising and blending. Sarah facilitated the discussion, encouraging each voice to contribute, amplifying their passion. The collective energy exceeded what she had encountered in any of her past experiences. For the first time, her peers weren't just following orders. They were envisioning a future they desired to be part of. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah made note of the powerful synergy that had emerged. Ideas had flourished, and her colleagues left the room with a sense of ownership and clarity, an unmistakable sign that change was possible. The atmosphere shimmered with empowerment, growing like a wildflower in a sunlit field after a rainstorm. Back at her office, she took a moment to reflect. The feeling of accomplishment swelled within her. She had conquered the fear of invisibility. No longer would she let doubt dictate the narrative of her contributions. Yet, she also understood that this victory was merely the beginning. The next step was more crucial. How would she translate this momentum into tangible changes, and how could she ensure every voice within her sphere was recognized and valued? The email buzz from Clara cut through her thoughts once more, reminding her of the video footage from the board meeting. With mounting curiosity, Sarah opened the link, watching intently as the video streamed. The footage cast light on John's dismissive remarks during the meeting, showcasing how he had brushed off vital contributions from other team members. Immediately, she sensed an opportunity. The very network of support she had felt in the meeting now seemed to fuse into a shared resolve, challenging John's once dominant narrative. With excitement coursing through her veins, Sarah wrote down her thoughts, planning a strategic response that addressed both John's behavior and the expectation of inclusive leadership. She correlated the sentiments expressed by her colleagues into a comprehensive proposal that could redefine their working culture, an opportunity to suggest protocols for inclusivity in decision-making processes that would provide clarity, transparency, and accountability, a crucial step toward breaking down the barriers that had long confined their success. Days turned into a flurry of activity as Sarah refined her proposal, seeking insights from peers and fostering connections within her organization. She welcomed feedback, knowing her growth hinged on the input of others. The result was a compelling presentation that addressed the internal culture of the company head-on, arguing for an ethos that championed respect and collaboration. When the day of the presentation arrived and she stood in the conference room corner, poised to deliver her proposal in front of the remaining board members, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. Interacting with John now felt like a dance. She had the tools and the resolve to navigate this space skillfully. The echoes of criticism that had once haunted her evolved into layers of resilience. After the whirlwind of her proposal, she could almost feel the gears of change shifting around them. Questions and discussions from her colleagues reflected their eagerness to embrace the idea of a new leadership framework, rooted in compassion and growth. In the days following the presentation, as endorsements flowed in from her peers advocating for her vision, she was pleasantly surprised by the overwhelming support. It signaled a collective readiness to let go of the old narrative binding them. The path ahead was riddled with challenges, but Sarah felt equipped. Her courage had transformed into action, her voice had led to a kindling of change, and she could nimbly navigate the landscape, rallying her colleagues around a shared dream. As whispers of John's departure solidified into reality, Sarah seized the moment to reach out to Clara. "Let's work together to ensure this vision isn't swept aside. We need to keep the conversations going." They began collaborating on external outreach and internal policies designed to promote a culture rooted firmly in collaboration. Finally, there she stood amidst the shifting tides of her professional landscape, a woman who had dared to ascend from doubt to confidence. The recognition and growth she experienced culminated in a pivotal moment, reflecting deeply rooted personal transformation. She was no longer just Sarah, the research scientist. She had become an advocate for herself, an essential voice to drive the change she so deeply desired. With gratitude swelling in her heart and a sense of renewed purpose illuminating her path, Sarah glanced out the window into the bright expanse of a new dawn, a symbol of the future she was determined to forge. Emboldened by the belief that compassion and collaboration could redefine the structures that had stifled her voice, She was ready to become the leader she had always aspired to be. Support our journey to uncover these narratives and others like it. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure our voices are heard. We want to hear you. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about Sarah's adventures, because your feedback matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this story with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's create a ripple of inspiration together.